For many decades, Japan has been the home of martial arts. They have given us so many arts like judo, karate, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and they have also contributed to the martial arts scene through having organizations like Pride, K1 and Rising, which allowed many great fighters to come and compete and show who they were, which in return produced a lot of great Japanese fighters. Now, as great as that is, we have yet to see a fighter from Japan come into the UFC and become a UFC world champion. There's been fighters before who have had the chance to get the shot at the title to become the champion, but all of them have failed. And for years, many people thought that the skill in Japan compared to the US in terms of the UFC is a big difference. However, there's now a fighter who potentially might be the first ever Japanese fighter to become a champion in the UFC, and his name is Kyoji Horiguchi. He's a fighter that was previously in the UFC and has returned, and he's not some just washed up old fighter. He is someone that is really skilled, and today we're going to be looking at why he might be potentially the first ever Japanese fighter to make history and become champion. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into the video. Now, when we look at his first run into the UFC, we can see that Kyoji was someone that was very exciting, was fast, coming from that karate background. His ability to just blitz in and hit you with shots was second to none. He was able to rack up enough wins to get a shot at the title, and the champion at the time was Demetrius Johnson. And fair enough, Kyoji did lose that fight, but he was young at that time. I think he was about 24 years old, and he did lose to, you could possibly argue, one of the greatest fighters of all time, which was Demetrius Johnson, which was nothing to be ashamed of, as it allowed him to understand that there were certain things that he must work on. He then had a couple of other fights in the UFC, but then decided to leave the UFC, and also in that time he did join American Top Team to improve on his skills. Kyoji then joined one of the most dominant organizations in Japan, which was Rising, and during his time in Rising you can see that the effect that he had from training at American Top Team really did him wonders, as when he was fighting in Rising you can see that he became a lot well-rounded, and that was primarily due to him switching to American Top Team and working on himself. He was able to pull off many sort of submissions and was still great at his striking. And he wasn't fighting any no-names in Rising, as he did fight Manel Kape, who is now a contender in the flyweight division in the UFC. Now, that being said, Kyoji did have some losses outside of the UFC. Specifically in Rising, he did lose to Kaya Sakura, who timed him perfectly, and he did lose to Tenshin Nasukawa, who, if you don't know, is possibly one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. And in Bellator, he did lose to Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix at bantamweight. Now, after fighting for many years outside of the UFC, Kyoji then made a comeback into the UFC and fighting against Tagir, who, if you don't know, is part of the whole Dagestan team, and he was able to submit Tagir in round 3 via a rear naked choke. Now, this had a lot of people excited, as you know, you had Kyoji coming back after many years being out of the UFC and showing how he's improved and beaten someone like Tagir. And as of recently, he just beat Amir Al-Bazi to a very dominant decision. When you look at the career of Kyoji Horiguchi, you can clearly see that he was a young man who came into the UFC, got his chance at the title, but lost. And that loss was a blessing in disguise, as it allowed him to understand that there were certain things that he had to work on. He then took the time out of the UFC to fight in different leagues and switching to American Top Team to work on his skills, which allowed him to become more well-rounded and gain a lot more experience, which you can now clearly see in his return into the UFC. Now, that being said, what are the certain reasons that Kyoji Horiguchi might be a champion now in the UFC? Well, the first reason is because of his skills. Kyoji Horiguchi is talented when it comes to striking, as his understanding of distance management and movement. He is someone that is able to just blitz at his opponents, and because of his speed, it does catch them off guard a bit. Having that karate background and being really good at it makes him a very difficult opponent to deal with. There's also the fact that because of that switch he made to American Top Team, it allowed him to work on his wrestling and grappling and submissions, and because of that he's now more well-rounded and is able to strike and grapple and submit, which has now made him a very technical, talented fighter. The second reason is going to be because of his experience. Kyoji has fought a lot of great fighters, he's lost and he's also won, which gives Kyoji a mental edge against the current champion Joshua Van. Joshua's quite young and Kyoji's quite experienced, which means that Kyoji has been given the chance to get tested by very high level opponents in all aspects. For example, he's had to face Demetrius Johnson, and that's no easy task to do, but that allowed Kyoji to understand that he has things to work on. Another example is, although it's not MMA, it's in kickboxing, against Tenshin Nasukawa, having to face a challenge like that is very challenging, but having to go through all these challenges and adversity, it's allowed Kyoji to work on himself and find all the little things that he's doing wrong and work on those, so that when he comes back into the UFC, he can be better than he was previously. Now, the final reason why Kyoji Horiguchi has the best chance of becoming the first Japanese champion in the UFC is because of timing. When you look at the flyweight division, the timing can't be more perfect for Kyoji. And as of recently, he's just beaten Amir Albazi, who was ranked 6th. And when you look at the top 5, you can see that Kyoji is more versatile and more well-rounded than all of them in terms of skill. He has also beaten the number 2 ranked fighter Manel Kape previously in Rizin. So there's like a storyline that the UFC can capitalize on, making a match between Manel Kape and Kyoji Horiguchi in a rematch in the UFC, which, if Kyoji wins, allows him to get a title shot at Joshua Van. And when you take into consideration of Kyoji's popularity, it's more likely that that type of scenario happens, as we all know that the UFC loves popularity and wants the big fights to happen all the time. I mean, take Kaya Sakura for example. He skipped the whole line and got a title shot just because he was a champion in Rizin and was a big name. So when you take all of that into consideration, this is the perfect plan for the UFC to follow, as for the UFC it allows for them to get a lot of popularity into the flyweight division, and for Kyoji Horiguchi it allows him to quickly get the chance of getting a title shot against Joshua Van. And when it comes to Kyoji versus Joshua Van, you could potentially argue that he does have a chance at beating Joshua Van. He's more versatile, he has a lot more skills, he does things that Joshua Van doesn't do, which makes him stand out more. He can grapple, he can wrestle, and his striking is a different style to Joshua Van, which makes him a different threat to Joshua Van. You've also got to consider that Joshua Van is a lot younger than Kyoji Horiguchi, and Kyoji has that experience behind him, fighting a lot of great fighters, gives him that edge against Joshua Van, as he's dealt with a lot more, which is why he might potentially be the first Japanese fighter to become a champion in the UFC. But anyways, these are the reasons why I believe that Kyoji Horiguchi might have a chance of becoming the first Japanese fighter to become champion in the UFC. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Let me know if you think Kyoji might be a champion in the UFC. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.